Welcome, everybody, to the show. No Dan tonight. Dan has this week to be sick, just like it was my turn to be sick last week. So hopefully everything is working. Please let me know if that is not the case, because I am on a completely new operating system now than I was the last time I live streamed. So hopefully we will have a good show. Anyway, the topic tonight is Big Chewy Wargames, and we'll get into that. But I've got some like personal updates and stuff to talk about, I guess, that I'll cover tomorrow night as well. I got sick. It was a sinus infection. I guess it still is a sinus infection. I'm still recovering from it, but I am fine enough to do live stream stuff. However, I hadn't counted on Dan not being here tonight and leaving me to do all the talking. So there might be some of that. And there might be a mute when it becomes when or if it becomes particularly bad, and maybe it won't. Who knows? But thanks everybody for coming out this evening. We're going to talk. I kind of wanted to talk. I guess let me do the preface, and I'll talk more about this. There's going to end up being like a state of the channel update in 2 or 3 weeks, I think, on the Monday show. So I am on Twitch. This is part of what leads into this. So the simple fact is I got too much stuff going on. I got too many channels and emails and accounts and browsers and profiles and all this, and it's just it's not workable. The workflow is a not working flow. So we're one of the effects of that is I'm pretty much not going to be on Facebook anymore. That's why I turned Twitch on tonight. So among other things that I'll, like I said, go over in the next couple of weeks. So, like I said, I'll do a Monday show, counter clipping show, where we have a state of the channel update. Maybe we'll do that in like first week of December every year or something like that. So there's a lot more to say about that. But part of it's kind of wrapped up into this project I'm working on right now. That it means I'm trying to lean things down. And that was part of my motivation for switching back, in my case, to Linux. I'm on Linux Mint 22. I think it's 22 at this point. Everything is mostly working fine. I cannot not see the team on 6219. I don't know why that is, and I guess I'll update this too. So the thing with the display names in the YouTube live chat, wherever that people were asking about, that is a YouTube change. It is rolling out gradually. It is not something I can turn off, unfortunately. You yourself can choose how you display in YouTube, but that means you have to go into your account to change it, and that is information. The latest information I was able to find was from like the 3rd week of October, so it's pretty recent. So sorry, YouTube's screwing that up too. So and it's going to screw me up, but it's not the end of the world. We'll just have to remember a whole new set of usernames. That's all. So hopefully everybody's doing okay. So part of my frustration with just so many different things going on is the attempt to compartmentalize everything. And now that I've decided to mostly ignore all that, it has given me enough bandwidth freed up to get excited about doing some wargaming again. Now we've got Winterfest coming up. Yeah, apparently it's a channel by channel thing. Some channels are showing it now, some channels are not. But eventually all channels will be like this. So somebody said that they watched another live stream. I think what might have been Jester's live stream or wherever those guys are at now. And they didn't have that problem, but I do. So good for them. And that is in fact what the numbers are for. That is your YouTube/Google ID, rather than like the display name that you set up when you set up the account. So you can still change that display name to whatever you want, but I think it won't show in the YouTube chat. Your ID will show in the YouTube chat. And YouTube's reason for this is, as given, is that they want to make it harder for people to impersonate other people, which I think is a desirable, but as usual with this stuff, the attempt to remove undesirable behavior grossly over affects the people who are not trying to do anything other than watch videos on YouTube and participate in live streams. So since I have, I have felt, I don't know if it's if I would call it burnout or not, but my focus level was just not working. So I feel refreshed now to some extent, and I expect to feel more refreshed over the coming weeks as gradually nonsense gets cleaned up. But given that we have a Winterfest to plan for, which is at the end of January, and there's going to be a big game played there, I would like to hear the audience suggestions for their favorite big chewy war games. Bonus points if I'm not looking for OCS, but by all means, if you have an OCS recommendation, throw that in there too. And I mean, mechanically meaty games is what I mean by chewy. And they don't have, by big, I don't necessarily mean monster. Doesn't have to take a million years to play. But, I'm not saying no if it does. And if I own the game already, bonus points from me. So, Brief Border Wars 2 is not what I was talking about. I got to tell you that. Well, the good thing about this, Rob Taylor, is I've already got all of the GCACW campaigns. This is a very good idea, actually, and I would like to get it done. I'm also working on a game room, so the table is sort of working at the moment, but succulent. Mike, this word almost made it into the thumbnail, but it's awfully long, so it wouldn't fit as well as what I actually put on the thumbnail. A GCACW campaign could be done very well, I think, as video, because you could trim out any extraneous things and just kind of focus on the die rolls and the movement and stuff like that. And I think you could make that work. Not live. I don't think it would work. Well, it can be made to work live if people know what they're doing. So, yep, this is what we found. Drew, I would make the stipulation that Fed and Empire is chewy regardless of what add-ons you decide you're going to use or not. It is merely chewier if you use the add-ons. Whiff is a thing that we would love to do at Winterfest, but the fact is that we've got 3 people who are like super interested and who will definitely be there, and we really need 5. And we've been having trouble locating people 4 and 5, and somebody that's going to be there the whole week to participate in this enormous game. GBACW, the Great Battles of the American Civil War series, also quite chewy, especially now. It's not really getting less chewy, is it? But we do have simple GBACW coming at some point fairly soon. So. And incidentally, we will be covering the latest GMT update on tomorrow's CHIT show. So, this is one of those games, Michael Lynch, this is one of those games that Empires in Arms. Also, we got the side chat kind of working now. It actually, can I pop this out? Pop out this video? Really? That's weird. Okay. I don't know what that even means. Back to tab. All right, StreamYard's rolling out a bunch of stuff too. They made the chat in the corner more readable, so that'd be cool. Last I heard, Dave Poirier, Dennis is coming and will be running Labatt something. I don't know what it will be specifically. Russia besieged. So I've had, as folks are going to be aware, I've had that table full of games that are maybe going to go away for several months, sitting in the game room, cluttering things up and taking up space that I could really be using for something useful, like doing game stuff in the game room. That table's clear now as of earlier today. I made a bunch of decisions. A whole lot of stuff went right back to the shelves, but about 5 totes worth of stuff, most of which is war games, and the vast majority of the tote volume is war games. Very good. October. We'll cover this tomorrow. Good call, Paul Dangle. Thank you for mentioning that. This is a solid game. Also relatively easy to learn because of the way the scenarios are constructed as well. But it's chewy. I would completely agree with that. And I've got that too. Nice. Freedom in the Galaxy from Drew. So another good suggestion. Yeah, there will be, almost every publisher is going to end up with a sale here at some point. I don't know about GMT. I cruised the update, and I didn't see anything about a sale in there, but I did not read all the text either. I went looking for the highlights. So, well, this is not living space down here. This is the game space, but that table didn't need to be here. BCS, a little less chewy, to be honest about it, than OCS, but chewy. It definitely crosses the threshold. But the fact is, I've played a decent amount of BCS and kind of a lot of OCS, and I'm kind of looking for something different. That is, we're probably talking about a World War II type of situation. We're probably, what I'm looking for, probably not a tactical situation, probably. Although there's a couple of things that might interest me, like Siege of Jerusalem, for example, the Avalon Hill Siege of Jerusalem, which I do not have and have never played, but which still has a pretty good following. This is possible that was their sale for the year, and if it is, then I'm cool with that. Streets of Stalingrad would be something different. I have played some Goss. I haven't played that much Goss. That's an interesting idea. I suppose if I was going to try and solo something, the problem is there's no middle ground with Goss, right? There's no. That's just not really true. But to get the effect I'm looking for out of Goss, I would need to set up either a campaign or a big or a very large scenario. And the one I'd really like to do is Atlantic Wall, but that's a scenario that's somewhat larger than very large. And I'm aware that you can split the beach and do like just the British sector or just the American sector, but there's no real rules for that either. So if you're kind of on your own, as with certain corners of Goss, you're kind of on your own trying to put that together. It doesn't necessarily need to take a long time to play. Doesn't necessarily. This is a good one. Victor Games Vietnam. I've got the original. I forget whether I kept the original or not, but I definitely have the remake from GMT. Yeah, Dan is not feeling well tonight. So I was sick last week, and Dan gets to be sick this week apparently. So sorry, Dan. We all wish you a speedy recovery. Hopefully he is watching here. So my guess is he might be sleeping it off. That's plausible. Ooh, Kevin Featherly is in the middle of a last chance for victory game. That'd be cool to see. All right. Next war game. One of the Columbus team is actually setting up the next war to give that a run, too. That is actually a good idea. And I've got that, too. Much appreciated, Drew. I've got a ways to acquire a copy without even necessarily spending cash. Christopher Smith says Decision is having a sale on its large/monster games. Good time to get a Goss game. It is a good time if that's the case, but I've got them all. So, but if anybody else has a taste for something, we'll call it extremely chewy. Is this going to work? I think it is. Let me see if I can get this to work. Remember, new web browser. I'm on a different browser now, different operating system, so not every button is exactly where I remember it being. So this might take a minute to pull this up and see if it works. Okay. Yeah, looks like it's working. Okay, cool. Let me turn these comments off for a moment here. Probably the best, let's see what they have here. Looks like they redid their website again, though. Where's the sale? Where's the store? Here we go. All right. So Monster Game Sale. All right. So this is 20% off one game, 25% off two games, and 30% off three or more games. So what is on tap here? Looks like Atlantic Wall, which is the largest of the Goss games by quite a bit, and probably the most complicated of the Goss games as well. We've got Operation Typhoon, which is a possibility. It's a game I'd love to play. We've got Wellington's Victory. I do not own this edition, but I have the Spitzer edition, so we're cool there. So there are 9 total monster games that decision lists in this sale. The 3 that I just mentioned, plus Advanced Pacific Theater of Operations. What this is a new edition with a lot added of the old ETO and PTO games from Spitzer. And those are actually solid games with maybe not perfect, but games that are there's some appeal there. Goss stands, Jeff T, for the Grand Operational Simulation series. So this is not a bad idea. Napoleon's Counter-Strike Dresden. Not a bad idea. Emperors of the Middle Ages. I've got the decision version of that. Anyway, what else is on here is Highway to the Reich Decisions version, which is substantially the same as the SPI version with better graphics. Axis Empire's Ultimate Edition, Imperium Romanum 3, which I've also got. The only game on this list that I don't have is actually Wellington's Victory, and the only reason that's the case is that I have a previous edition of it and didn't feel like doing that. I'm not necessarily talking for content either. I've got some different ideas for that we'll hear about when we do that State of the Channel type of thing. This is not, this is well motivated. Let's hope my voice holds out. I'm just going to make sure I drink lots of water. And that's also, well, they have just changed it again. So maybe they changed the back end again. I have no idea. The store looks pretty much the same though. Anyway, what else? Lucky Forward, which is the latest large Goss game, and Storm of Steel. Of the Goss games, the one that I would say is probably the most approachable for the new Goss player is probably Hurtgen Hell's Forest. That's really only if the game is going to be complicated. It's going to be complicated, whichever one you find. You could also run down the Hanut game or Anu game that was in World at War magazine, and that's an interesting game. It uses kind of a truncated version of the Goss rules. It's not a bad introduction to some of the concepts, but it is also not going to really be a Goss-like. You're going to have a different experience playing the whole game Goss than you will playing Hanut. Let me put it that way. But it might be instructionally useful. A Break on Normandy is the one of the games of that series that I would love to have, and I have not managed to find a copy of it yet. I will. Don't worry about it. I got Storm over Arnhem instead, though. So Mark Herman is here. Mark, thanks for stopping by. Big Chewy War Games. I also don't want to do too much sniffling on camera. I might not be able to go for an hour of just me talking, to be honest. We'll see. I'm gonna try and make it to 8 here, 8, 9, whatever fucking time it is. We had the time change today, so that confused me when I woke up. I went, oh my god, I'm late. So, best version still available. Lucky Forward. So there are a couple advantages to going with Lucky Forward. One, if you buy the game, it has the updated rulebook and updated player aids and all that in it, which you really do want regardless of which Goss game you're playing. And those, the player aids in particular, are not at least last I checked, are not downloadable. So you can't just like run them off yourself. They sold a pack of them at one point, but that sold out very quickly and is gone. So in my case, it turns out I got tested for COVID and the flu, and it is not either one of those things. This was a sinus infection in my case. So I think a lot of people will say that the L2 version is probably their preferred version of Streets of Stalingrad. It is definitely the largest, and it is definitely the most impressive to see set up. I'm not sure I've seen either of the other two versions set up, although I have seen the games. And at some point we might get another one. We'll see. I don't know where that's at. There's been talk about that for years. We will see. Yeah, a bunch of these decision things, though. I did manage to pick up. Thank you, patrons, for the advanced ETO, which is the one that's of the two that's much harder to get. And I know that locally I have a guy who wants to play those. So, all right. To be completely honest, Kevin Featherly says it becomes affordable with the sale. If you got in on the pre-order of that, it was only like $100. I considered that pretty reasonable, considering that it's like I don't know, something like 12 or 1300 count, 1400 count, or something like that. The new one, the old original one, was 3 maps. Am I remembering that right? I believe I am. And this one is 5, so it's a huge game. And it is substantially the same game as SPI's classic Operation Typhoon, with better graphics, 5/8-inch counters, bigger maps. So it's going to be a little harder for some people to fit on their table. But you're also going to have less eye strain. So, you take and you give. The best Stalingrad. All right. So I'm going to answer this from my perspective at face value, because I think that's the spirit in which the question is intended. Michael Lynch asks, what is the best Stalingrad game? In my experience, in my opinion, let me put it that way, and I have played this, the best Stalingrad experience, if you're talking about the battle in the city, is the ASL Pack Red Factories, which is the old module Red Barricades and a new module Red October that you can play together. You do not need to play them together. But they also have a bunch of scenarios, so you don't necessarily have to play out. You're not fighting out the whole city in either case. You're fighting over these factory districts. And there are a bunch of small scenarios to give you a taste of that. Now you got to know ASL to play it, and this is not entry level ASL either. I would not try to do that. On the other hand, what you can do as entry level ASL is just go grab Guards Counterattack. It's the first scenario in Beyond Valor, and was I think one of the first or second scenarios in the original Squad Leader. And it's a good scenario. And if you really loved it, you can, and it's, city fighting in Stalingrad. So small format, large format. For me, I feel like this ASL is how I would want to do Stalingrad, the city fight. This is possible. I have not played Streets of Stalingrad. I have seen it set up. They had it set up at Compass Expo, part of it, set up at Compass Expo a couple years ago. And I've handled the game before. In fact, Tractor Works, you can, as I recall, combine Guards Counterattack and the Tractor Works into one larger scenario. However, I believe there aren't enough counters in Soviet counters specifically in Beyond Valor to do that with. That's not a problem for me because I got extra stuff. So Molotov Cocktail Games asks if people still use Vassal for ASL, or is there something else dedicated to ASL? So there's kind of like the ASL recognized that Vassal was developed in the first place to support online play of ASL. So it still does that. As far as I'm aware, people still do it that way. And as far as I'm aware, that is considered the best way to do online play of ASL. But as far as I know, there isn't something new and special that has come out. I would think I would have heard about it if there was. Interestingly, there's a Columbus group that was meeting, I think, monthly at one of the local, like a rotating local libraries. And I went to one of their meetings. It was the one I went to, and it was about how to play ASL over Vassal. And it was very illuminating. And then, like the next week, pandemic hit, and that was that. So, or at least prior to the next meeting, anyway. So, Chardonzar has a spare copy of the L2 version in the box. Art shipped it to him which is pretty fantastic too. It's nicely produced. I will tell you that. And of course, if you have a preference for another World War II tactical squad level system, chances are very good there is some support for Stalingrad for that too. Certainly there is for lock and load. I'm not sure I had any of it, but I'm pretty sure there is for Stalingrad for Panzer Grenadier, which is platoon level. And there is, of course, the Stalingrad module for old school tactical. So there's plenty. And if you don't have a taste for any of that, you can go get Storm over Stalingrad. All right, let me put this back on. So you can make it tall, which sucks, and you can make it wide, but you can't make it both tall and wide. And you can't change the gradient. I think that's a little annoying, but the feature is already better than it was when they rolled it out. All right, new Axis and Allies Stalingrad, lightweight-ish. Okay, so I cannot speak to this at all, but I would imagine that it is really legitimately lightweight, given all the Axis and Allies stuff that I'm even vaguely familiar with. But I'm again not a Axis and Allies expert. I do not keep track of that ecosystem. I have no idea. My sources are telling me good things about John Hill's Battle for Stalingrad. I'm not sure whether one would want to acquire the SPI version or the much later Excalibur version, because I have not done a compare between the two, even physically. Not new computer, new operating system on the old computer. I uninstall after about a week of kind of hemming and hawing about it and thinking, oh, I'm going to have to do all this stuff to keep the data intact. Blah, 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 blah. I didn't have to do very much of that at all. I could have set up a dual boot arrangement, and that would have worked fine as a temporary measure while I get used to it. And then I decided, I'm overthinking this. I store all the data on the computer, like the important files and documents and all that stuff for things that I work on, like games and that kind of thing. I store all those in a way such that it is easily accessible and recoverable in the event of a catastrophic failure. So given that, there's no reason for me to worry about, accidentally overwriting the data or anything like that. So I said, fuck it. I wiped it and reinstalled Linux Mint on the old computer. It has crashed once, and there's been a little bit of flakiness, but more or less everything's working. But it does mean that I'm going to have to use different programs for certain things than I was using before, which is a good thing, but there is going to be a bit of a learning curve. Drew says John Hill had a thing for city fights. Jerusalem Hue, the old Hue from Mayfair, yeah. And the original squad leader. Windows, I was on Windows. This was not a Windows 11 decision. I know a lot of people switched because of the Windows 10 end-of-life thing. That I was already on Windows 11 on all three computers, so that was not a problem. I have also re-imaged the backup computer, which I would love to be able to turn into like a home server, so I don't have to manually move files around. That would be awesome. And there's like 18 gigs on that thing. And the laptop I kept on Windows 11 for now. So, and that laptop actually just upgraded to Windows 11, but I got tired of fighting with it. I felt like I was fighting the computer all the time when it would lock up or freeze or whatever. Just tired of it. And I have not been really at all, not to say that it has been completely flawless. It has not been. There have been some small challenges, but I haven't done any super technical stuff. And all the basic stuff is pretty much working. And most of my bread and butter programs that I use every day are available on Linux anyway. So, all right, there you go. I went with Mint and the Cinnamon desktop environment. So you've got like with Linux, you've got kind of the operating system, which is its own thing, and you've got they're all pretty lean. At least any of the distributions I looked for, they're all pretty clean compared to something like Windows. And then you have the desktop environment, which is like the desktop and the windows and the way in which you interact with the machine that isn't from the command line. That is the desktop environment. And there's dozens of different Linux distributions, and there's dozens of different desktop environments, and you can mix and match as you choose. To me, Linux Mint with Cinnamon seemed like the most painless alternative, and I have used Mint before. So now, see, this is what happens. So this is what happens. And this is what I said before the show. If any fuckstick goes in on Twitch and gives me this, here's what I'm going to do. And I am sorry for the legitimate viewer who is watching on Twitch, but it is thanks to this fuckstick that you will no longer be able to watch this show on Twitch. Join us over on YouTube. So that's that. I can do that now too. I can just cut it. So I do not have the ability to monitor and police comments on Twitch, right, or Facebook, but nobody really does that. And Twitch is vulnerable to yahoos coming in and doing that. So we'll get rid of this, but it doesn't really matter. I can't really moderate it out of StreamYard. I can moderate YouTube out of StreamYard. I can even ban people directly from StreamYard, but I can't do it on Twitch. So Ubuntu, I considered Ubuntu because I kind of wanted a fresh start as far as the desktop goes too. And I considered Ubuntu, but if I really wanted to, I could just install GNOME on Mint too. So it's like it doesn't really matter that much. So, who would play an OCS Balkan campaign war game? From Italy's attack on Greece to the air assault, I am aware of no such project. I don't know enough about this campaign to comment too much, but I would be interested in thinking about it a little harder. The terrain is not generally going to be very good, certainly for fighting over Yugoslavia. Or Greece, for that matter. I would purchase something like this, to be honest. Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. I can make whatever changes I want. I need something, I can install it. It's all fine. Nowadays, it's not like you got to run down individual packages and install from the command line. There's a software manager that lets you install a bunch of things with standard packages with a click, and it's very easy to use. I have played this campaign that Jeff Beeler is asking about in Europa, actually, which was mentioned up thread. And I had a good time with it. I thought it was a very good Europa game. But the OCS game would be different, right? The scale would be radically different. I think this would be interesting. I would be interested. I'm not positive that it would be a good game, but I'm not sure that it wouldn't. I'd have to think about that and learn a little more about the campaign and how it progressed and the timetables and all that. But this would work. I'd buy it. So, right, exactly. It's safe to click because it's the Russians. We might be getting those Russians because we talk so much about Russia here on this show. So Jim would have to design... Jeff would have to design the OCS Balkan Front game. Hey, you want some help with that? Or advice, I should say. I don't want to say help because I don't have time to help. But if you want to have a conversation about such a project, I would be happy to help. OCS Marita Mercur. Hey, cool. Whatever. It's in Brief Border Wars 2 as well. I'd have to look at that more closely. I played Balkan Front rather than the older Marita Mercur. I do think that Marita Mercur I think the experience between the two is going to be substantially the same. I think the biggest reason why you would want Balkan Front over Marita Mercur is its better integration into War in the Desert. But if you don't plan to do that, and I probably don't recommend that you do, then Marita Mercur is perfectly fine. That said, there are some system changes too that took place between like the first generation, like Marita Mercur games, and the last generation, meaning the GRD games. So some of the rules are going to be a little different. The stacking rule, for example, is going to be a little bit different. Not sure that'll have a big impact, but I can tell you that some things occurred. That stacking limit rule changed for First to Fight, actually, which was the revision of Case White. Yes, and I actually have this too. Dave Perrier mentions Diffraction Entertainment's Balkan Fury. I believe there is a second edition of that out now. I have the first edition. Thank you, John Longshore. And I would actually try it. And if there was any module that would get me to try that system, that would be the one, because I played the Europa version. I had a positive experience with it. I don't like the TSWW system. I think it's too bloated and cumbersome. Is how that boils down. And I've talked about this before. For me, I know there are people who enjoy it. Good for them. I'm not with them, however. So, and I can respect that, to want the extra detail. But I for me, I don't feel like the extra detail is adding enough extra enjoyment or simulation to the game to justify its presence in the rules or its additional workload at the table. So, sorry about the coughing. There's not much I can do about it, though. All right. So Jeff says that Marine Corps had a more detailed order of battle, a snapshot of the armies just before the invasions, rather than integrated with the Europa system. That's probably a good thing, actually. On the other, a lack of concern with integration into other Europa modules, I do think is a good thing. However, I do think that Europa as a system kind of got lost in its order of battle work, which is admirable order of battle research, but it was unnecessary and ended up adding too much crunch to the game. But it's chewy, I'll give you that. All right, Red Shoulder, an armored trooper Orgus game. City fight with big robots, and the rules are in Japanese. This is probably fun. I do own Wavell's War. I think Wavell's War contains the material that you need to link Balkan Front and War in the Desert, in addition to including the Wavell's War stuff, which is East Africa. So I don't have like a complete Europa collection, but it's one of those things where I don't feel the need to like get everything of it in every version. But I have every campaign that was done, or theater, if you will, in Europa, and I'm cool with that. I'm mostly satisfied to have either edition. It doesn't really matter to me. But that said, most of the editions that I have are in fact the GRD editions. So, it sounds like Jeff's played Marina Mercure, and I haven't. Like I said, I've only played Balkan Front. There's at least 3 games on this topic that I can think of with Balkan this, Balkan that, Balkan the other. So if I screw the names up, that is why. I think Wavell's War was only released in a Ziploc, as I recall. That is definitely how I received it. I got mine off of eBay several years ago, and I paid what I thought was a pretty good price for it, which I think was about $175. I mean, it is a lot of stuff, but again, I convinced I will play Europa again. Hell, maybe that's what I should do. Maybe I should set up a small Europa game. That's not a bad idea, actually. That way I'm not starting completely ice cold on the system. Stacking Limit is returned. Thank you for the message, and a reminder to thumbs the video up and subscribe to the channel if you're not already. And we're back. We're glad to see you back in the saddle. So, if I were going to do that, though, pick Europa. Winter War might be one that I would think about. I've got that. I've got Storm over Scandinavia, so I could do Narvik. I have First to Fight, so I could do Poland. And interestingly, First to Fight and Balkan Front are the 2 that are punched and clipped and organized, too. I would love to have this. I've got the first edition of Fall of France. I would prefer the second edition for no particular reason other than the box is nicer. But the cost is also 2 to 3 times more. And I'm unwilling to pay 2 to 3 times what I paid for the first edition, which I think was like $80. And somebody in the chat here knows exactly what the number was, but it was something like that. I don't care enough to try and run down the other one. It's the one I have is fine. I always liked those particular Europa boxes, the ones with the grid on them, and then the map of Europe, and then it would highlight the part of Europe that you were fighting over in that particular volume. I loved those boxes. Molotov Cup build. There's going to be. I'm sure there will be a game. I'm not sure. But I would be surprised if there wasn't going to be a game of this on a table at Winterfest, because some of the local guys are big fans, and it is usually set up as a side game or something like that. It's been forever since Mark Herman has played Narvik. Now, as I recall, the original Narvik had a somewhat modified system from baseline Europa, and I think that is replicated in Storm over Scandinavia, which is what I have. Back in the day, the 2 Europa games that I had were Fire in the East, which I never played. To this day, I've never played it, and Case White, which is Poland. And I liked Case White. I thought, and I still think Case White, I think it's a more interesting campaign than people think it's going to be, for one thing. Rob Taylor recently sold a copy of Narvik. There's still people playing Europa, but you don't see it at conventions as much anymore, because it is hard to do at conventions, right? Because of the size of it. I mean, let's say that something occurred that said, made it practical to run a room of Europa players at Origins again. You've only got, let's assume you set it up on Wednesday night and tear it down on Sunday. That gives you Thursday, Friday, Saturday to play it. Okay. And you might be able to get, if you're really putting the nose to the grindstone, you might be able to get 12 to 14 hours of play each day in, but you're not going to make that much progress in something quite that big. So the solution for people playing games like this, these huge footprint games, is to play them at a longer convention like Consim World Expo or WBC or Winterfest. So... Yep, I have seen this first edition of Narvik. The one I had back in the day was the grid box version, because that's what the local game store had. S&T Tito, yeah, this game drew. I guess I wasn't really listening at the time it came out, which was something like 1980. But since then, I've talked to a bunch of people about it, and it was generally poo-pooed. But I also have acquired it. I got it from Noble Knight out of the clearance cave for something like $1, unpunched. So it's easy to get copies of Tito if you're willing to settle for the magazine version. There is a box version of it as well, and I doesn't look that bad to me. It looks like a fairly interesting game. I can see why people maybe didn't like it at the time. Yep. So Mark got it right after Dragnok Austin, which is the original on which Fire in the East was based. I think people rejected it's unconventional warfare. It's guerrilla partisan warfare in Yugoslavia. So it's unconventional from that respect, and it has a point-to-point map, which I think is probably why people this is a military subject. Why do we get this point? I want a hex grid, blah, 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 blah. And I sympathize with that. But at the same time, there's times and places for hex grids versus point-to-point or whatever maps, and the operational movement of troops is probably not very important in that game. So I think a point-to-point map is probably a pretty good idea, and maybe the right idea. One of these days I'll play it. Yeah, this is my understanding. I really haven't looked at it that closely. Storm over Scandinavia includes Narvik and a Europa scale version of the invasion of Norway. Yeah, I think it was a scale difference, something like that. Well, a number of things were supposed to have happened in the history of Europa. They have not yet happened. I can guarantee people played it. I've personally seen people playing it. Years ago at Europa Fest, it was on a table every single year, and the Columbus local group played it. I don't know, 6-7 years ago, something like that. So that's how I feel. Sometimes you could say a game is ahead of its time, but maybe it's got some issues that are partly because it's ahead of its time. And I think a number of Dunigan designs feel like that to me. I don't know if Tito was a Dunigan design or not, but I can tell you that something like Origins of World War II was, and that definitely feels like ahead of its time, and suffers for it too a little bit. It is maybe 2 generations of games earlier than it would normally have been. Another interesting Dunigan piece that I think this applies to is Dallas the television role-playing game. I'm not saying good, okay? I'm saying it's really fascinating to look at that game to see what Dunigan was trying to do with it, and possibly also see why it didn't really work. But there's been a little bit of a resurgence in interest in that. In Dallas, the television role-playing game. Some people did a live play of it not that long ago. I don't remember who that was. Danny Secretary, do I ever think Europa will be updated in today's graphics and the rules updated as well? No, I do not. Not unless there's some kind of dramatic change in the way that particular thing is getting published. Meandering Mike says Dick Rustin did Tito. I believe, last I heard, I am not paying attention to what these people are doing, okay? However, what I can tell you is that something like 2 years ago, some friends of mine actually had contact with them. And as far as they were saying at the time, they're still working. They're literally still working on the game and other Europa projects. I do not expect to ever see any of that. So... no, Dallas was not a bestseller. This is not a terrible idea as a side game, to be honest about. Oh, I'd love this. Mark Herman says, I love the Dallas hate mail from ladies who were fans of the show and were shocked at what they got in the box. I don't know. I mean, I'm saying this as somebody who not only is inside the hobby now, but was inside the hobby at the time. So to me, it doesn't seem strange. But I can absolutely see old ladies being confused, and non-gamers in general being confused. And I liked the Dallas TV show when I was a kid, too. There are a lot of indie RPGs that you might get a session or two out of that cover kind of non-superhuman, non-supernatural, more mundane type of situations. Now, on the other hand, if somebody bought Dallas a television role-playing game for the kid, good luck, because you're probably going to have to figure it out and play it with them. All right. I think I can handle another 11 minutes here, folks. I think as a kid that was like 8 at the time, I think why I liked it was JR and his cool hat. I think that was the appeal of Dallas for me at the time. Yes, we absolutely will. And we have seen relatively, the emergence of new monster game series have not really stopped, right? We're continuing to see new Lavatai games, new OCS games, new GC ACW games, new GB ACW games, some of which are quite large. But in the last, I don't know, couple of decades at least, we have also seen the emergence of things like Groundyard Simulations and the Diffraction Entertainment stuff. Those are relatively new. Wow. Mark says that what was much funnier, and I can imagine, I would love to have heard the commentary, actually. Dunigan still does not own a TV, a decision I can totally respect. Watching episodes of Dallas for research. This would have been a little bit later for me. I would have been a little too young to appreciate this. Let me put it that way. Later on, perhaps. I've never watched Yellowstone. I have no idea. I've seen clips of it on the internet, but I've never seen that. Oh, nice. Very nice. Very nice. From Laverne and Shirley. No kidding. A classic sitcom. I don't remember this at all. I remember JR getting shot because that was like national headlines at the time. I have seen clips of Billy Bob in Landman 2, and I keep trying to. We've got like a voucher for a free month of Paramount Plus, and I keep trying to get the wife to turn it on so I can at least watch an episode or two of it. So I am reasonably sure I didn't realize at the time. Again, I'm like 8, maybe 9 years old. I'm not sure I realized at the time that JR was supposed to be an asshole, but there's that. This was not Dallas. This was Dynasty. But Knots Landing was the spinoff of Dallas, though. My mom used to watch Knots Landing. Yeah, I want to see that. There's a number of things on Paramount Plus I want to see. Right now, I am... since I got sick and was basically completely laid up for like 2 days, I watched all of Andor again, except for the last 3 episodes. So this will be whenever I finish those last 3 episodes, and I will. That will be the 3rd time through it, and this is the time when I'm really paying fairly close attention. All right, Ramos Asparagus, thanks for stopping by. Did see a YouTube clip that explains the Yiddish fine points of a schlemiel versus a schlemazel. I always wondered what those words meant, and I looked them up at one point, and now I can't remember any of it. Was Dallas the dream season? All right, you know what? If you folks are sure, cool. I thought that was Dynasty. I don't watch any of this shit, so. Oh, excellent. Excellent. Have fun at ST Hist. Mark, along with anybody else who might be going, I will not be joining you this year. Besides, I'm diseased right now anyway. So. And Wolf Dog, John, I'm going to miss you. I will miss you as well. Unfortunately, we will not get to hang out this time. Maybe next year. That'd be cool. That happened too. But that's a different thing. And I think, didn't St. Elsewhere end like that too? Actually, it's just the worst writing decision you could ever possibly make, by the way. Especially for like a TV show that's been on the air for several years. Imagine a sci-fi show based on Traveler. I don't need to. We're good. Rob Taylor's headed to Compass Expo. Danny Gable asks about the Traveler game. So we haven't started playing yet. We did a character creation session for a couple of the alternate players who are going to be the backups. We have this Friday, we have the main group character creation. And by main group, I mean main groups plural, because there's 10 people who are, once characters are created, going to be split into 2 separate groups that will run on alternating weeks. Possibly with some interaction between them. And definitely some character connections between them, because that's built into the game. I will undoubtedly have more to say about that. But I am kind of just getting over being... I had like no energy to work on this, so I kind of did very little. Traveler Universe, no. Absolutely not. They're very different. However, the story format, 100%. So... They sold out. This happens again. This happens every year, pretty much. They do cap attendance at SD Hist because they have limited space and they are basically at capacity. So, for anybody that hasn't been, I had a fabulous time last year. I'd be happy to be there again. There's no money for that this year. I've got a right now. Things are getting budgeted for Winterfest, so. I think that I think the showrunners have talked about this as something they thought of, but didn't actually do. But I can't tell you because I did not watch Breaking Bad all the way to the end. I got through 4 or 5 episodes or something like that. That this wouldn't be surprising. And again, at some point, space is going to be a factor. The Winterfest team has expanded its space by about 300% at the new location. So they're going to have, at least this year, they're going to have plenty of room. And I forget what the exact dates are, but it's end of January. It got moved as well due to some other event that was happening at the location. Which is fine by me because, I don't really care about the exact date. I don't care if it is it's during the Super Bowl. I don't care. What I do care is if it overlaps with Valentine's Day, because I know I can do the required activities at a different day. Nevertheless, every year it creates friction that I would rather not have to deal with. So I am perfectly happy with the different date that they have chosen now. Oh, we'll see. This is a ways away, Bill. Since there is no overhead setup yet, but unless you're talking about what we did a couple weeks ago, that was jury rigged. So there will eventually be like a new overhead setup that isn't jury rigged, and that will be fabulous. But at the moment, I've got a clamp and a tripod and some arms and stuff to hold cameras and things. So. Yeah, that was kind of intended to see just how it would go. And I agree. Colin Flanagan says travel character creation can be tons of fun with a group that likes to form connections. Yeah, that's why we're doing it this way. And I'm going to be completely frazzled by the end of 4 hours with 10 people. We're going to have to move extremely fast. It's going to be tight. Anyways, Hexy is here. Hexy, thanks for stopping by. Yes, exactly. This is the kind of friction I don't mind. How about that? Niagara Board Game Weekend is in January as well. So, Perfidious Albion, yeah, God damn it, that keeps happening. I was trying to kind of test how that was going to go. And in some respects, it went very well. In other respects, there's like tremendous need to make improvements as far as, where's the equipment placement and the lighting and all that stuff. So, the biggest single problem in that room at the moment is not the lack of a dedicated camera rig. It is the lighting, because the lighting it's way too bright. I came real close to buying a couple of shop lights yesterday, but that wouldn't really have helped. I need a different, better lighting solution and not just more overhead light. There's plenty of overhead light already. That's not a problem. So. I have heard very good things about the Niagara Board Game Weekend, but I have not, and I've been invited to go by a couple of times, and I don't have the capacity. So even aside from this year and the difficult-ish conditions we've had this year, I wouldn't have had the capacity, and in fact said no last year as well. So, well, you might not have minded the lighting, but trust me, the lighting is creating problems because the cameras and the computers will automatically adjust to lighting conditions. My eyes don't do that as well. So the lighting for me was really too dim, and the lighting for the cameras, if I had turned the overhead light on, would have been way too bright. It would have been all glare. You wouldn't have been able to see a thing. So I turned that off and did some different things with lighting so that it was more indirect, which worked well photographically, but quite poorly for me actually seeing what the pieces say. So there's that. Yeah, no kidding. Well, I mean, listen, I kind of know what I need. I need those big balloon lights is what I need. because those are kind of all indirect. And I have the reflector. I have a reflector. I could jury rig something with a clamp light or something like that, and I might end up doing that. But it would be nice to have an actual thing that I could just, here it goes, and then when I don't need it, I can pick it up and move it to wherever it needs to go, rather than something that's clamped onto this, and I can't replicate exactly where it was clamped for the next time, and what a pain. So, John Mulroy, thanks for stopping by. This is not a reaching out to a local school's drama or AV departments is actually not a bad idea. The universe game behind me is, in fact, SPI's universe from designer John Butterfield. So it is an interesting and I think not entirely successful attempt on the part of SPI to break into the sci-fi RPG market, which was at the time completely dominated by Traveller. And would continue to be until at least Star Frontiers came out, and then there was competition. But then Star Wars came out, and there was no longer any competition. All right, Chris Yap joining late, just in time for me to sign off. I apologize for any coughing, sniffling, snorting, or any other nasalities that may have occurred this evening, but I am getting over getting sick. So we're going to wrap this up tonight. I want to thank everybody for coming. We will all wish Dan a speedy recovery from his whatever he has, but it's probably something similar to what I had. So it's the cold or the flu or the COVID or the whatever, but he's sick. So once again, thanks everybody for coming out tonight. We will have counterclipping tomorrow night at the usual time, and we will substantially be covering the GMT and a couple of other updates that we will need to cover, in addition to a perfunctory show topic. All right, so folks, everybody have a great rest of the night. We'll see you all again soon.